Hi, this is Todd Krieger. I'm here to talk to you about a couple I worked with successfully where uh, it was a very toxic relationship. In this case, the woman was very abusive verbally and would put down the man consistently. And he was quite beaten down by it and would end up withdrawing. And then, of course, it wasn't good for him, but it wasn't good for her either. But it was consistently a pattern of abuse, of verbal abuse from her to him. There wasn't any physical abuse, but it definitely was toxic in the sense that it really was affecting his work, his self-esteem. Well, self-esteem affects all areas. His health, his physical health was going down. I'm not going to say that we could say that his high blood pressure was all because of her, but relationships can be sources of great emotional and physical well-being, but as we know, it's also can be a source of a lot of emotional and physical distress. So I started seeing them as a couple, and of course, one of the things we could work on with him was his tendency to get depressed and to withdraw and shut down, and often has to be hard on himself and would take it out on himself, probably more cardiovascularly in a physical way than anything else. But what I decided to do, and I do this sometimes with couples, I might split them up. And in this case, it seemed clinically correct to focus on her first and deal with what was underlying her hostility and her anger. And so we worked for a little while in terms of where that came from. Because when people are abusive, usually I'm looking for where they were abused or where they were a victim in some way. And it's almost, I'll say almost always, but kind of always that way. And so again, we'll call her name Jenny, and his name is Bob. So you have Jenny and Bob. So Jenny, I mean, as I explored her history more deeply, she was she watched her dad abuse her mom growing up, and she realized that she made a decision that she's going to never let any man get the upper hand. Her mother just took it. And so, in some way, she identified with the abuser, her dad, when she got married. This is what sometimes people will do, and so she remembers that moment where she says, "I will never let any man do to me what my mom let my dad do to her." She also had memories of abuse, of him yelling and screaming and banging things. She doesn't remember him ever hitting her, but he terrified her. When he would get out of control, he'd break things in the room. The door was locked. She was really scared as a little girl. So, one of the things that we did, like I do a lot, is one of the things I utilize a lot is EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and it's an approach that you could do online, virtually, as well as in person. And we did this virtually, and she was able to get in touch with the memory. There were several, but one major one when she was a terrified little girl. And we help process that. And what we do is we process it to the point where that memory gets desensitized and reprocessed, and we install a positive belief. So the negative belief was, I'm not safe. The positive belief is, I can I can protect myself. And so we really did a nice job with that. And she did a nice job with that with my assistance. And then we went to other memories of verbal abuse, and we even went to a memory of an earlier relationship where she felt taken advantage of. But you started to see a pattern where there was this protective part of her that was being toxic. So some of these videos, or sometimes I talk about it more from the person who was the victim of the toxicity. But in this one, she was the one that was really being toxic to her husband because it was all protection, and she was unconsciously acting it out with her husband, a man who, in her mind at least, could have the capacity to abuse her or to hurt her or to take advantage of her. So she maybe on some level picked a man who was more mild-mannered, but in addition to that, really kind of kept him down as an unconscious way of making sure she never was the one that was down. And none of this was intentional. This is how it works sometimes. So as we process these memories, she started to see, well, her anger just dissipated. She didn't need all that protection. And she started to see her husband for who he was rather than her projections of who he was or she was afraid he would be. And then when we finished enough of that, we brought him in. I worked with him alone, actually, to help him find his power, find his assertion, set his boundaries, and then I brought them in together. And then we finished out with some good couples work where she was able to express her disappointment in kinder ways, not be so forceful. She was able to be more vulnerable. He was able to feel his power. He felt more secure. His self-esteem lifted. It helped him in his health. His health really got better, really better. His work improved. Everything improved. It was one of those wonderful couple cases where we did it in a kind of a sequential way that made sense. I brought him in together, then worked with her, then worked a little bit with him, and then we brought them together. And so this was a time, an example of a relationship that was toxic and then was healthy and not toxic. And I just, again, I love what I do. It works. So anyway, this is Todd Krieger that is encouraging you, if you find that you are being the toxic person in the relationship, or that you're the victim of a toxic person, or you're both toxic, that underlying it, there are oftentimes reasons and traumas or memories, and that as we face them, and we can face them in a way like with EMDR, you're not really getting re-traumatized as you experience that. It's set up in a way, we set it up in a way, certified EMDR therapists set it up in a way that you're able to process them with a minimum of discomfort. I'm not saying no discomfort, but it's temporary and ultimately liberating. All right, this is Todd Krieger, making the world safe.